I'd like to tell you a story from a few years ago about a project for a major financial company. Now, we needed to create a mobile responsive web app that would enable customers to sign up for a new credit lending product. It had to be integrated both to a core platform, to Salesforce CRM, and to a third-party system to verify identity, credit, and fraud risk. It needed to meet complex regulatory and legal compliance requirements, all of which were non-negotiable. Despite this, it needed to also be turnkey, self-service, easy to understand, and most importantly, it had to make a big increase in sales. This was a huge opportunity for the company. Time frames were very pressured and it was ambitious. We needed to get to market as soon as possible so that we could retain and leverage competitive market advantage. Now, to make those ambitious dates, the perception was that we needed to cut back on design and discovery. We needed to give the engineering team as much time as possible to get something in market. And that often feels like the case, right? There's never enough time to do discovery and design properly, and research and analysis and design often isn't even seen as part of delivery. However, when we say there isn't time, what we often mean is the value we get from that time isn't as clear as the value of doing. We're action-oriented, right? And it looks really good to our senior stakeholders to get going on the build. And we have Agile, right? So we'll just work it out as we go along. It's a little bit like going on a road trip without planning or packing and just leaving early and hoping you can buy what you need along the way, only without actually needing to stop or get delayed. Later on in this project, we started running into hidden complexities. We encountered unexpected technical challenges and design scenarios and user and business requirements that were new and new risks. So the question is, what was the cost? Well, how long is a piece of string? We love getting that answer back, right? Well, the solution was unknown. In fact, we needed additional unexpected effort to be able to assess the size of the unexpected effort. It created uncertainty for senior stakeholders right in the middle of the project. It caused delays, frustration, missed sprint goals, and the team took a huge drop in morale. Ultimately, no one was to blame. But how do we get back on track? So we started being realistic. We started deferring and de-scoping. MVP started to mean the things we're still actually confident to deliver. And unfortunately, customer experience and innovation were the first things to be axed. So the actual point of the project to gain competitive market advantage ended up being the thing that we sacrificed so that we could deliver ultimately a set of basic requirements. Now, I guess no one could have expected these issues, or could they? My name is Dan Cornwall. I serve as the General Manager of Design at ClearPoint. And I'm here with Chris Lloyd, our Director of Experience Strategy. And we're here to talk about a process we use that's been developed over many years through collaboration with many of our talented colleagues in the industry. It's been shaped and refined over years of experimentation and trial and error. And it helps us validate upfront discovery and design activities to ensure that they have clear and obvious value to everyone as to why we're doing them. And it lets us design our approach so that we can plan to avoid delays and risks and problems before they occur. It provides a way for us to create clarity for ourselves and our clients about the knowns and the unknowns from the outset of the project. What do we actually know that we're heading into, and what are we likely to trip over? So to explore this further, I'll hand over to Chris, who will talk you through the principles of this approach.
All right, so approach planning is a design-led method structured around the principles of divergence and convergence. So going wide to understand the situation holistically before we converge around a plan. It helps us expose risks and assumptions so they can be planned for and de-scoped from the beginning so that there are less surprises, as Dan mentioned, along the way. It lets us explore how much we really know about the task that we're about to embark on, and it lets us deal with gaps proactively before they become a problem. It also helps us compare multiple options and approaches collaboratively and decide them together. And figure out how we can best spend that time and effort for the greatest value. And lastly, it helps us be realistic about team size and resourcing. Are we set up to meet expectations, or are we actually hoping for a miracle? So at ClearPoint, the double diamond is key to how we design, collaborate, and innovate together. Approach planning is an extra step that we can add before this process. It's our diamond before the double diamond, so to speak. It allows us to have a clearly defined and aligned plan before we embark on the journey of discovery, design, and delivery. And much like planning a group road trip, as Dan mentioned earlier, it allows everybody to anticipate what roads we're going to travel down and the stops that we're going to have along the way. It ensures that everyone will arrive at the same destination with the same destination in mind. And if we need to detour along the way, we have a grounded way to reevaluate and replan. Now, approach planning is a lightweight activity, and it's emphasised by the shape and the size kind of on the diagram behind me. It usually takes 2 to 3 hours of team effort and can be structured as a single workshop or several sessions as calendars allow. At its core, approach planning considers multiple perspectives, and it's a great way to get everybody on the same page. To do that, we need to include a fully cross-disciplinary group to ensure true representation of project knowledge. And it's really important that practitioners from each area are present so that knowledge isn't missed and that gaps in the project or the initiative aren't falsely identified. This also ensures that everybody in the project has a shared view of the approach, the priorities, and that everybody has buy-in for the decisions that are going to be made. It also means that key business stakeholders can provide critical input into the team's approach, and through this process gain better empathy for the activities, the effort, and the investment needed, ensuring that when we actually get to presenting the proposal or working through those activities together, that there are no surprises. More crucially, it enables designers and engineers to mentally rehearse the sequence of activities and interdependencies together across those different disciplines and work streams. And this ensures that we help build a shared accountability of the plan. So, as a method, approach planning helps the team answer these types of critical questions. Firstly, what do we need to make or learn? What do we need to understand more of? What are the end deliverables, outcomes, and technology that we're working towards? Do we need to create a proof of concept or prototype along the way? And if so, how? How might we get a better view of the current state and test our hypotheses and assumptions of customers before committing too heavily to building something that doesn't meet needs? How do we organise ourselves so that we can create a transition between discovery, design, and delivery to ensure that there's a really shared understanding of the solution? And how do we use that to guide decision making? And in addition to that, what forums do we need and with whom? What can we do to ensure that we de-risk delivery along the way and label our assumptions early and use that opportunity to neutralise them? And lastly, how do we work within the parameters of budget, time, and scope? This is really critical. How do we make economically informed decisions that still work towards the objectives within the constraints without, as Dan mentioned earlier, deprioritising value? So, we've talked a little bit about what it helps us understand and the questions that it surfaces. So, we also have to talk about approach planning as an adaptable and scalable method. It complements various situations and ways of working. We typically run this as an in-person workshop, as we mentioned earlier. It can also be done collaboratively online using tools like Miro. At ClearPoint, we commonly use this for defining the high-level approach of an initiative before we get underway. And we've also helped clients scale this approach to quarterly planning ceremonies within tribes, squads, and different work streams to build a shared view of delivery. But it doesn't just need to happen at the beginning. It's also just as effective at a smaller scale, such as during agile project development. For example, if a new requirement appears or requirements change, we can use it to review and replan our approach. And during the journey of the project, it's also something that we can check our progress against. It's not just about describing what we'll do, but also why we will do them. Cool, so I've talked a little bit about the theory, sounds good, right? But look, what's that journey look like? So let's talk through a bit of a high-level approach to harness the power of approach planning in your work. Firstly, we start by setting the scene and aligning the team around the challenge. Second, we identify, with that framed, we ask the team to identify key questions and risks related to the project. With those surfaced, we then define activities that will enable us to answer those questions and mitigate any risks that have been surfaced. And lastly, we then configure the activities and size effort, formulating them into a plan that's actionable and that clearly defines who, what, and when. So let's take a bit of time to break those down into a little bit more detail. First, we start by assembling the team and ensure that there's a really clear understanding of the roles and contributions in the session and to the project. The purpose of this is to align them around the goals and to make sure that they understand the project terrain. From experience, what we've found is this works best as a clear artifact summarising what we're doing and why as the first alignment point. We can't plan in a vacuum. So things like strategic planning tools like a business case or a lean canvas, or what we have here at ClearPoint, a briefing canvas, are really excellent starting places. They also allow the team something to track progress against during the planning phase and also during the project. Are we working towards the outcomes and success measures that we had identified at the beginning? And are we addressing the challenge? So this is a really useful artifact to repivot to along the way. Next, we ask the team to write questions and identify risks. This works best as an individual activity to ensure that diversity of thought and that all perspectives are heard. We then allow each team member to present and play back their questions to the group. Thinking about the challenge that Dan posed earlier, the questions that we might raise are, well, what do we know already? There's probably a lot of information and knowledge within the business that we can leverage. Who's our target audience for this solution? And what technology platform are we targeting? And naturally, as part of this process, we might identify a key risk that the proposed timeframe is incredibly ambitious. So how might we mitigate that? And also, it doesn't feel like we've got executive buy-in, so this feels like it's set up to fail. Now, it's not uncommon for this process to generate a significant number of questions and expose risks that have not been previously identified. And that's okay. In fact, that's invited as part of this process. This is often a really good time to pause and ask whether the process has raised critical questions that need to be answered before we can progress. And in those situations at ClearPoint, we've gone back and refined the brief or the scope of the challenge with our clients to ensure that we have the right information to proceed and for us together to be successful. So naturally, this process will highlight themes of common questions across team members. And sometimes those are framed in different ways. And that's, again, quite okay. Clustering similar questions as up here as described is a good way to keep on top of the noise and make synthesis earlier. We can also use dot voting as a way to gain a shared understanding from the group of the key questions and risks. What are the most important things that are on the mind of the group, and what are the things we absolutely need to make sure that we solve? Once we've aligned on the questions and risks, we then identify activities that help us answer the questions and mitigate those risks. Like before, this works best as a generative activity where individual team members can identify the activities that they might need to conduct for their role in the project and then share those back to the group. It also facilitates a conversation and consensus around the appropriate methods or ways to solve the questions. Is a survey the best way for us to understand who our target audience is? Or should we be conducting primary research to interview customers directly? And thinking about risks, within the constraints of budget and time, what is the most efficient way for us to conduct those activities? How do we go about these things together? So once we've done that, we can now configure and rationalize activities into a plan and size them accordingly. Once activities have been identified that map and answer questions and risks, it's time for us to build a work plan. So what we can do is we can configure activities into sprints or map those against a calendar. Those can be quite useful ways to surface logical sequences, key milestones, and key dependencies across different team members. Sometimes what we've found is that assigning effort to each activity, so whether that be hours, story points, or t-shirt sizing for each member involved, can help build a good picture of the relative weight of the project and ensure that it's shaped in the right way to optimize return on investment. So, at the end of the process, what we get is risks, questions, and assumptions that have been really clearly identified, the activities, milestones, and mitigations that have been generated, and lastly, the quantified effort for the activities and roadmap to kind of execute those activities.
Thanks, Chris. So, at a high level, approach planning helps us align on what we know and don't know about a project. And then from this simple activity, we get a broad and holistic understanding of the next phases of this journey that we're about to undertake. And sure, all plans are subject to change and tweaks as they encounter the real world. However, the goal of this is ideally we don't want to take sudden left turns. We want each phase of our work to have a deliberate and consistent velocity. That's our goal. And so we want to be prepared with options that we've considered ahead of time. We want to also set expectations to the wider people involved in what we're doing, that what might be about to happen could happen, and that we know what we'll do if it does. We don't really want to be living in a world where we're reactionary, that we don't have any options left because we've run out of time, and so all we can do is defer scope. So, to deliver successful digital outcomes, we need the shared alignment and the preparedness of everyone involved, especially if people are coming from different mindsets, from different disciplines. So the approach planning technique ensures that the assumptions and risks and questions that are going to occur during the project and the things that are going to make the project actually go sideways are not just, record in a register somebody else's problem until they occur, but they've actually been socialized and explored by everyone and accepted as something that could happen, and everyone's working together to avoid them. It ensures that the phases and the flows of the roadmap are intentionally designed to navigate challenges. We don't want the difficult stuff to be pushed off till later until we find out we've got no time to actually deal with it. We don't want to encounter them mid-sprint. And early on in the project, as Chris kind of alluded, getting everyone together and talking about whether we have what we need to actually get to the end of this, and whether everyone at least has a sense of confidence that this is achievable. So early on in the project, it helps us highlight those major issues or roadblocks or key things that are missing, because they may need to be escalated back to the business or to senior leadership to reset expectations. So over the years, we've explored many different approaches and ways to do this. We've tinkered with taking steps out and putting them back in. And this is the process we've got that consistently and reliably enables us to safeguard the future of the project. Now, Abraham Lincoln is once quoted as saying, "If I only had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe." For us, approach planning is one of the key ways that we know to plan and prepare so that we actually go faster in the long run. Thank you.